Hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here for our second session of Neurodivergent Changemakers. I'm Karen Tim. I'm the founder of the Neurodivergent Infinity Network of Educators. I'm a white presenting female with long, kind of purpley hair. And there's a white background. I'm in my kitchen right now. So there's a green plant behind me and the blue jay on the wall. Um, and my pronouns are she, her, and I use what's called identity first language as a member of the autistic community. I share that with you only because that's tends to be the language that we use, but obviously we defer to each individual preference when it comes to identities. It is my absolute pleasure to join you in this space and introduce you all to or reintroduce you to Karen Muriuki, a fellow autistic advocate, but just an overall amazing human being who has done so many great things around the world, but in certainly in her home country of Kenya. And we're featuring neurodivergent change makers. And Karen came to mind right away when we were thinking about who to invite. So I'm so pleased to have her here with us. On the screen, you will see our 9 logo. And I'll just read what the alt text says as well. That the 9 logo is a rainbow infinity symbol breaking through a red brick wall, creating space for a vine with 9 green leaves to emerge. And the words Neurodivergent Infinity Network of Educators is on the rainbow infinity symbol. And if you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we in this land that we call Canada today, we have an established tradition as in many countries, and as many countries do as well today, of acknowledging the land and the relationship that the land has to the people who have inhabited the land for so long and taking care of the land and the waters. And so this is our land acknowledgement created, developed by NINE. NINE acknowledges that Indigenous nations around the world have long-standing relationships with the lands upon which our advocacy and community leadership occur, in recognizing the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of these nations. We value that the struggle for Indigenous rights is deeply connected to all human rights work. When we recognize the systemic and social connections within our work, it is essential that we refuse to historicize these struggles because doing so ignores the impact of colonial oppression, which persists today. In our advocacy efforts, we are committed to disrupting and dismantling the systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their lands and denied their rights to self-determination. This work is essential to human rights work across the world. And the image there is sunlight shining through the snow-covered evergreen forest, casting shadows on the snowy forest floor. And when I think of our land acknowledgements, a personal connection for me today is just in kind of getting ready for the session and taking some time for myself beforehand. Um, I was out walking my dog and just walking through the snow and seeing the sunlight through the trees. Yes, Karen, we have snow. I know. I was thinking about you earlier because I thought
Yeah.
if I go out and walk on the frozen lake, I should totally send Karen a picture of that. But anyway, in
Yeah.
the forest and hearing the crunching of the snow and just like breathing in the air, like these are all essential. Our connections to the land and the people, we owe such gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who have taken such care of the land for generations and generations and generations. And so that's in part why we do those acknowledgements. All right, next slide, please. So to do this heart work together in community, we just remind anybody who joins us for our sessions that it's very important that we all try to be present in our learning um, in our own way, right? Find your focus, honor your comfort, take breaks when you need it. Um, Being on camera is labor. You do not have to have your camera on at any time. And this is true for hosts, participants, and presenters. Um, be mindful that everyone has very different experiences. We honor and value diverse forms of communication. So we will try very hard to honor the chat when we have our Q&A session in a little while, but also during the session too. So we're going to try to do that because we want to normalize that the chat is just as important as mouth words, which is what I'm using right now. Be open to new ideas. We're always sharing and always learning, right? Be okay with discomfort, but give yourself grace. There's a lot of learning that's going on, and sometimes the information that we thought we knew can get shaken up a bit, right? As we have new learning. So trying to put together the old with the new and figuring out where you are in relation to your learning is very important. And engage how you can at this moment in time, as I kind of alluded to before. Speaking of that, stim freely. Everybody stims. For many of us who are autistic or otherwise neurodivergent, it's essential. It helps us to self-regulate, to experience our emotions in ways that work for us, and to express ourselves. There's so many reasons why. And so, if we have a session where somebody is stimming on camera, um, that tells us that it's a safe space for them. But nobody ever has to do that. And not everybody feels comfortable doing that, right? So these are some of the things that we're always trying to consider and normalize. And then finally, as needed, an affinity space is available. So if anybody at any time feels, upset or really needs to just decompress, share space with somebody else who is neurodivergent, or even just step away. It's a little different in a virtual setting compared to an in-person setting. In a virtual setting, you may feel you can just walk into the next room, right? And that's totally fine. But we just want to offer to you that if anybody needs that, where one of us will join you in a space to decompress or just to support however needed. And I just want to take a moment also to thank the 9 leadership team. We have in our space today, Melissa, Edwina, and Sidra, all of whom will be helping in their own ways during the session. And huge thanks to them and our fellow member, Catherine, who helped to put together this event and the last event as well. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide. Ah, yes. I love this photo, Karen. It's such a great one. So without further ado, here is a beautiful picture of Karen. I'll just do the alt text first. Close up Karen in a denim shirt with dark brown skin, and her hair is in dreadlocks. Oh, and there's a friend to bring in. There we go. And so Karen's coming to us live from her home country of Kenya. So it's actually past midnight there. So again, thank you, Karen. Karen is a neurodiversity consultant for Ibongo International and the organizing secretary for the Differently Talented Society of Kenya. She's a certified disability inclusion facilitator and an award-winning Best Inclusion Influencer from Enable. Karen is an alumnus of the International Disability Alliance Bridge Kenya for the UN-CRPD Sustainable Development Goals, and an inclusive edutainment enthusiast and advocate. And this session today will allow Karen to share some of her story as an advocate, but also provide some insights into the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And when when Karen and I first met, it was, I guess, back prior to the summit and probably through online events and such. And I was just so excited to hear about the UN-CRPD because I had never heard of it before. And it was my honor and luck to be able to meet Karen, who has learned so much about it and has participated in advanced trainings to share this information about this extremely important human rights work that is applicable across the world, but not all countries have ratified it. So I won't say too much about that. I live in Canada where it has been ratified, but that does not mean that all these things are in place. And so it's very important for us to all learn more about the CRPD, and I owe such gratitude to Karen for my own learning related to that, because I go back to it regularly when I'm thinking about, what is it that we need to be fighting for and advocating for, not just here in our local area, but around the world. And that's where our global partnerships are important, because we can touch base with so many people and be doing things all together in that context. All right, and next slide, please. Oh, okay, so we can go back to Karen. And Karen, do you have slides that you would like to share, or would you like to just speak to us? Are you?
Yeah, let me just speak to you guys. I didn't prepare any slides
It's
or
totally
anything. Let me
fine.
just speak. Yeah, I'd
That's totally
rather if I just do it. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Let me just do verbatim.
So I'm
Yeah.
gonna just mute my mic,
Mm.
and you may only see me, but that's okay. At least you got somebody nodding. um, but I'm gonna hand things
Yeah.
over to you. I'll hand things over to
Thank
you.
you.
And
Yeah.
would you rather leave questions to the end? Is that how you'd like to do it?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay.
At
Okay,
least
perfect.
for easier interaction.
Yeah, perfect.
So
Welcome.
thank you. So for those who don't know me, I am Muriuki. I am an autistic adult from Kenya. I'll describe who I am. I am a black-skinned, middle-aged woman. I am currently have my locks are tied into a bun, and I'm just wearing a pink top. And behind me is a white wall unit in my house. And of course, for the deaf community, this is my sign name. That's my sign name. So I have to be very cross disability inclusive. I wear many hats, as my namesake has already described in this one of the slides. So I won't go into that. So at least it's right there. So I'll just go. I'll just do a. I'll just continue with my experiences as a self-advocate, and I'll be talking about leveraging the CRPD. Of course, we understand that a lot of the countries have ratified, including ours. We ratified it in 2008. Still, as you already know, it has to go to a lot of vetting within the CRPD committee. So let me just go through my experiences. As you know, I was diagnosed autistic in 1985. At that time in the 80s, it was known as mental. I don't like using that word, but I have to be compelled to say it still. Mental retardation, like the levels, how they would levelize it, how they would categorize autism, like mental retardation with signs of autism. So in general, I'm autistic. Um, how people took that back here is largely very negative. Even now, people still don't understand what autism is. They don't know what autism is. But in the 80s and 90s, because of that kind of a word, it was considered a curse. We know within the communities in Africa, once you hear that a child is has received an autism diagnosis or any kind of intellectual or psychosocial disability, that child is considered a curse. So that child is either locked away in that is hidden or killed. So the acceptance of that child is they don't accept that child, or sometimes even the parents, or in some cases, some parents might feel compelled of get that denial stages. So you being a caregiver of a child, of an autistic child or a neurodivergent child, when you hear that your child is neurodivergent, then you feel like, okay, what did I do to that child? I wanted that child to be the quote unquote normal. So that was the case in within my own family setting, how they took that diagnosis. When you hear that kind of a diagnosis, you feel like, no, this is not what I wanted. So yeah, my journey into advocacy started around, I'd say 2016, 20-ish, 2015, 16, 17 there. I didn't even know that I was autistic until I looked at my reports that I got from the pediatrician back in those times. And you imagine nobody telling you and you finding out for yourself that you're autistic. So it really affected my mental health. And when you realize that you have to find everything out on your own as an autistic adult, yet you never got the early interventions as a child because of the level of lack of understanding, and of course stigma was also a part of that, then it meant that you have to just sort yourself out, put yourself in that bootstrap. So it's um, that way. So I use social media to advocate for myself, looked at YouTube videos, but I felt the other YouTube videos that I was just watching was just for Autism Speaks. And you know me, the minute I realized what Autism Speaks was doing, I said, I'm not going to look at that. It does not speak for me. Neither has it spoken for a lot of autistic people. They're the biggest violators of the UN-CRPD. I don't understand why people still follow it or follow their direction. So I just decided, let me just watch videos that are led by autistic people and by actual autistic people, especially non-speakers, and even those who can also communicate just like myself. And that is how I realized, oh, okay, that was how I started. That is how I moved my advocacy. So I started getting recognized. I started, especially within my community of Kenya, although at that time people had never heard of autism in adulthood. They only know autism in children. And I found it to be very concerning. Like, how else have you not met an autistic adult? You only know a child, and they'll think that autism will outgrow once they transition into adulthood. So I used my sort of level of advocacy to educate parents. Yes, your autistic child will become an adult, and they will not outgrow out of it. So it is up to you to realize that yes. And I remember there was one conference I attended, and then one of them was asking me, "Are you a parent to an autistic child?" I said, "No, I'm autistic adult." I had to show them I had to show them my diagnosis, and we're like, "What? Okay, I've never met an autistic adult before." Until they realized, "Wow, okay, this is where our misinformation was coming from." So yeah, um, I started my advocacy continued even now, but towards I think 2020, I met several autistic adults from my end in Kenya, and even we created a kind of a connection in our community, even parents of autistic children. And it was a very great community to even interact with them, and it was such an incredible feeling. So they made me feel at home. They made me feel welcome. And despite of everything, any differences that they have, but they felt like, yes, we need to start thinking about ways that we could help autistic adults in general to be able to mentor them into advocacy. And so far, I can tell you even from the feedback that I've just received and the admiration from younger autistic adults, they see that I've mentored to be who they are right now, and they can even see that the impact is really being felt. So yeah, I joined Bridge around 2021. That was during the height of COVID-19, and we're still under lockdown. And so far, it was a very good experience, and learning about the convention, knowing very well that our country is a signatory to the convention, and I learned about, yes, you're taught that to advocate for your rights as a person with disability, especially as an autistic person. You have to look at all of the articles of the convention. And during that period, the first phase, actually, I picked an article of the convention being Article 19. Article 19 is one of my favorite articles of the convention that really speaks to why persons with disabilities have a right to be included and being accepted in the community. And that is the same thing with with us as autistic people. We need to be included and accepted in the community. So I realized that the gaps, we looked at the data. I had to really write it down. I had to look at the statistics of, desegregated data as according to the census here in this country, the last census that we've done. I realized that persons with disabilities were uncatered for. So where are persons with disabilities? Where is the data? Where is the desegregated data when it comes to the census? The last census that was held in 2019, are persons with disabilities being accounted for? So I realized that was also a gap, and even all types of disabilities, including those with hidden disabilities such as neurodivergent disabilities, psychosocial and intellectual disabilities, have not been accounted for, and that was a gap that I felt like I needed to address it. And by the time I got my full certification in the second phase, now you have to look beyond the convention. Now you have to look at the SDGs. And that was like where I had to really think of what are those goals that you're sustaining, especially as a person with disability, when you're advocating not just for the convention, but also the sustainable goals. How are persons with disabilities being represented in sustaining those goals? So yeah, it was a very good engagement. I got my certification. Even when I was still within the Bridge Academy, I still had to attend the inclusive education workshops that were organized by IDA. And they did a position paper. You can also download, you can go to their website and download their position paper on inclusive education in line with Article 24 of the UN-CRPD. And that is why they're insisting that when it comes to education and being an edtech, and through which I'll get to later, I'll address that one. It just speaks into why inclusive edtech is needed, especially for accessible content and services for children with disabilities, for persons with disabilities in general. So yeah, other than that, I joined the academy to become a disability inclusion facilitator. You need to have the prerequisites of carrying out disability awareness trainings, and you have to cater for all persons with all diverse disabilities, not just neurodivergent disabilities, but all disabilities. Either somebody who is blind and visually impaired, deaf and hard of hearing, physical disability, those things. And then you are supposed to, within the time frame, you're supposed to go for, you have to give disability inclusive trainings to PPIs who work with persons with disabilities, especially in the TO50 project that is being organized by Light for the World and UDPK. They have now a program for young persons with disabilities with the We Can Work project within Light for the World and MasterCard. So they have that is being organized, and it's in several African countries where young persons with disabilities are trained to become youth DIS. And then obviously I joined Ubongo as a neurodiversity consultant, and they're based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And so far they're learning a lot from me in matters of educational content that is accessible to persons with disabilities. It is important that content, when you're creating content, but I liked the fact that they created content, especially for Ubongo kids in sign language. But we hope to create more for persons with disabilities. But we have a new show called Nuzo in Namia. It features one of the characters that is autistic. And I featured in the first season where I was person of the day, just to get into the level of a 3 to 6-year-old child who's learning about autism. And when you're teaching children without disabilities about children with disabilities, how to be very accepting and inclusive to children with disabilities, you have to teach them in a level that they can understand. Just like the way you teach an non-autistic child about autism, you have an autistic friend who is being stigmatized, yet you're teaching an autistic child, a non-autistic child, about what autism is from a perspective of an autistic adult. So I played that role, and it was a very incredible role. So I've been with Ubongo since 2023, and it has been very good. They're learning so much from me as of now. I offer mentorship programs for our interns who are learning about employability skills, and I teach them about self-advocacy trainings and all that. So it's still ongoing. There's now in our second cohort. We are waiting to get our second cohort. We just resumed just recently. So I just resumed because I was on leave. So I just came back on leave. So just checking through emails and all that. So yeah. I also attended the NABLE conference back in 2022. Yes, 2022. It was my first time, and also I was a panelist at this as well. And also the following year, I was still a panelist, and of course, that was the year I won the Best Inclusion Influencer Awards. And of course, last year it was my third time attending it, even though I didn't speak at a panel, but I hope this year I'll speak about it. And of course, I attended the EdTech conference in Nigeria. And as you know now, being an EdTech enthusiast, I gave my submissions as to why you need to think about creating inclusive services, inclusive EdTech services and content to children with disabilities. I felt, okay, while I was still in Nigeria, I felt like, overall it was okay. It was my first time in a West African country. Obviously, I've now traveled in two African countries. I've traveled in Tanzania for, of course, work-related things, and of course, Nigeria for the EdTech conference. And okay, my experience there was okay, was memorable. Although one of the things I really needed to pick out is the idea of inclusive EdTech and making it accessible to children with disabilities, and making sure that that is being felt. Still on matters of policy making, as you know, I'm part of the committee that is overseeing Kenya's progress, whether, of course, they have fully complied with the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We did a report with our facilitator from IDA, and already that report has been submitted. We've received the report, as organizations of women with disabilities in Kenya. And we look at whether or not Kenya is committed to complying with the convention. And we looked at all of the articles of the convention of persons with disabilities. So we see whether Kenya has finally complied. And now that the Global Disability Summit is this year, it's being held in Berlin. We need to assess whether governments are making their commitments towards the Global Disability Summit, whether they are fully committed to disability rights. So, yeah, and the good news is that, guys, for the very first time I'll be in Germany. For the very first time I'm going to Germany. So my application has been successful. It has been approved. So the only thing is just the visa and everything. So I'm very happy. I'm very excited about going to Germany as a first ever autistic person to go to Germany. And it's the first ever conference being held in the month of April, being Autism Acceptance Month. So I'm very happy. I'm shocked even. The minute I just got my email, I was like, okay, did I make it? Did I not make it? So I checked and I was like, wow, okay, this is shocking. Yeah. Let me touch on why we need to leverage the CRPD, making it neuroaffirming. As you know, Kenya has is a signatory to the convention. However, we need to address certain things that we need to ensure that we leverage on that. As we leverage the convention, even as we even look at our laws within our either like now Kenya has within our country, we have the 2010 Constitution, and I would quote from Article 54 of the Constitution of Kenya that speaks of persons with disabilities being the rights holders. Persons with disabilities, I'm using a human rights model of disability, where we look at persons with disabilities as the rights holders of their rights. And we need to leverage that in matters of neurodiversity. We need to look at how can we leverage it to make it even more tangible. And when you look at the laws, we look at certain articles of the convention, when you realize that some of the abusive practices that are not in compliance with the convention, when you look at organizations that advocate for autistic individuals are not having autistic persons on the board, and it's in total violation of the convention, that is in the principle of nothing about us without us, and still using the medical model of disability to mean that, disability is seen as something that needs to be fixed. So we need to really look in terms of applying the policies, looking at the constitution of the various countries that we live in. Are they applying the constitution that speaks of disability rights and neurodiversity rights to be in compliance with the convention or not? So whether we need to look at, like now what we have done here in Kenya, I can say like in the report mechanism that we've done, and I was also part of the CRPD committee back in 2023, we looked at all of the articles and found out whether the government is fully complying with the convention. We looked at some of the articles that of the convention that like Article 15 and 16. Article 15 speaks of torture, free from torture and abuse. And here we talk about ABA. You know that Kenya is, we look at ABA as which is which contravenes Article 15 and 16 of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability. And in find that even some countries still do ABA. Why are they still insisting on making autistic individuals do ABA, yet it contravenes the convention? Why are you inviting organizations when you don't have a person on your board that is autistic, that wants to hold you accountable for not applying the CRPD to your organization? Why aren't you having at least an autistic member? We look at general comment number 7 of the CRPD. Why isn't there no autistic person on your board? So general comment number 7, we have to apply general comment number 7 in such that organizations or persons with disabilities need to have persons with disabilities on the board. Like for example, now here, we like now National Council of Persons with Disabilities, which was formed through an act of parliament, we're holding elections, and now they're looking for a caregiver of a child with disability and a person with disability ourselves. Like in our community now, they're looking for a caregiver of an autistic child and an autistic adult. So they recommended me, and it's a good start. I'm happy with it, so that we can be able to see whether or not we have a neurodivergent person. Initially, it was just a parent of an autistic child, but we felt it was not inclusive. Why was there an autistic person on the board? So when we are applying the principle of nothing about us without us, which is the principle of the CRPD, have at least an autistic person to be in compliance with general comment number 7. Having persons with disabilities as part of the board of organizations of persons with disabilities. And that is why General Comment 7 is also important to apply that. So within just leveraging the CRPD in neurodivergence, look at how many autistic persons are in every OPD. to make sure it's in compliance with the CRPD. Look at some of the practices that are fully in compliance with the CRPD in terms of education, health, women and girls, equality between men and women, of course. We look at some of the articles of the convention that talks about equality between men and women. So those are the most important things we look at. Is it have accessibility if it's women with disabilities, if it's women and girls with disabilities, is it within children with disabilities, if it's awareness creation? That is one of the most important ones. When we leverage those articles, all of the articles of the CRPD, when it comes to neurodiversity, we need to make sure that everything that we do, even when you go to these government meetings, find out whether or not are they having persons with disabilities on the board? Are they having autistic and neurodivergent persons on the board of trustees or even of OPDs or whatever government agencies that it is? I would even advise, look at the constitution of your country, even ours. Like ours in Kenya, we have Article 54. We have the constitution that we look at Article 54. We, at the moment right now, there's a bill in Parliament, Persons with Disability Act of 2024. It's still there. It's still in its reading. Yet it is supposed to be debated in Parliament, and we have been pushing for its enactment. We need that act passed. We need that act. We need the Persons with Disability Act passed in Parliament in order for it to be fully compliant with the CRPD. Yet we as a country, we had enacted the CRPD in 2008. So find out whether the bill in the board, having autistic persons in the board to be fully compliant to the convention, be in those government meetings that speaks about neurodiversity, and find out, do you have any autistic person that is there, or just parents of autistic children? Because I've seen in most meetings, I just find out how many autistic people have been invited into these meetings. They'll tell you zero. They'll tell you zero, and you're like, are you serious? Like, are you following through with the convention? Are you in compliance? That is why you need to apply, especially in advocacy, whether it's something that really matters to you. To conclude, I know I've exhausted what I wanted to say. Yeah, but to conclude is this. Let us be our accountability partners. Let us hold governments accountable. Let us hold people accountable, whether they're applying your affirmative options when it comes to the CRPD, whether advocacy is being followed through, it has to be pushed through. Policies that are neuro-affirming and they're compliant, and I'm going to be general, especially, I'm going to be cross-disability inclusive generally. Having persons with disabilities on the board, whenever they're having government meetings, have persons with disabilities present in your board in order for your rights to be heard. Because we pushed for it ourselves. We as persons with disabilities really pushed it for ourselves. And that is how it also applies to neurodiverse persons. And me, I'm a very strong believer that when it comes to the convention, when it comes to something that addresses our rights and our needs as autistic and neurodivergent persons, we need to be present. Any neurodivergent meetings that does not have any autistic or neurodiverse persons in the board, that is in contravenance, that you're contravening the CRPD and you're contravening General Comment number 7 of the UN-CRPD. That is very important. So I'll leave the words, I'll do a parting shot and say, always be strong enough. You're better, you're unique. Let nobody tell you otherwise. So just push through with it for this year. Let it be our agenda for the year 2025. We're in the new year, and let it be our agenda for this year. And thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we definitely let it be our year, right? Like it's
Yes.
our time is now. And I mean, I was trying to write. It's been getting darker here, and I'm losing light. So I was trying to write notes on all the different things, and just
Yeah.
trying. Like I didn't want to interrupt you, right? But like
It's okay.
my
It's okay.
mind just kept going as you were talking about
Mm.
all of these things in terms of, you know, how do we hold a country, an organization accountable? How do we all, like, what do we do as an individual? What do we do as a school board or as a community
Yes.
agency, as a local municipality, as policymakers? We all play such an important role. And yet, many people, at least in my conversations with politicians and educators and decision makers, there's very little awareness of the
Mm.
existence of the CRPD. and and
It's true.
and and that's it's terrifying to me that there are decision makers who are tasked with creating these new, and not just here in Canada, but all around the world. We hear this. I know
Yes.
Sophia say the same, right? Like all of these countries are assigning the responsibility of creating policies and legislation, and this list of rules of what we will do to make sure that people who are neurodivergent or otherwise disabled or multiply, disabled, to make sure that they get what they need. But the
Mm.
reality is that when the representation is not based on the experiences of the people that are being planned for,
Yes.
they're getting it wrong. It's everybody's getting
It's
it wrong.
okay.
and and
Mhm.
that's why your work has really resonated with me, because like I said, when I introduced you,
Yeah.
it was mind-blowing to me that this even existed. And I've been around for a while, and I'm very passionate about human rights, and but I did not know until probably 2021, I want to say, because no, 2020 maybe, because when we did the summit,
Mm.
the Intersectional Infinity Summit, you had presented there, so it would have been before that,
Yeah.
right? But I hadn't known about it. I didn't know about it existing.
Mm.
And it's, I know that there's only so much individuals can do and what have you, but that
Mm.
knowledge is powerful, because when we're speaking the same language in terms of the terms that are in the CRPD, when we're referring to, like you said, it was created in the spirit of nothing about us without us, that
Mhm.
is the number one piece. And so we can't make decisions as a country or as an organization for people unless those people are present in the conversation and are decision makers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And um I mean, I don't want to keep rambling on, because I know we're kind
It's
of
okay.
rolling into the question, but are you okay
Yeah.
to stick around for a few questions, for
Yeah, that's okay.
because I
Yeah.
know I know
Yeah.
we're recording, and those that weren't present earlier, those who are joining us later in the recording,
Yeah.
there
It's
was
okay.
there's been some kind of an issue with getting people access into the Zoom, so our
It's
audience
okay.
live is smaller, right? But
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think this is important dialogue that is starting in different places. This is a continuation of things that you've been involved in and that I've been involved in, that Nine has tried to kind of, pollinate our educational system with. Um, but it's a continuation of these conversations. And so when people access the recording later on, these questions are important, right? And your
Very true.
expertise and experience is important. Um, yeah, so many thoughts about all that you shared. I really though also because I've never actually had the opportunity to just hear more about your story as an individual, right? Like we kind of autistics, we kind of get in the space and we just do, right? This is the thing I'm
Regurgitate.
here to do. And so I really value you being willing to share parts of your
Yes,
story
yes.
and your motivation because you know we all wear our own identities, our many layers of our own identity, and each experience
Mm,
is so unique. And it what you were sharing was reminding me of something that is very present in our work at Nine, which is that intersectionality piece, an understanding that my experiences are very different from somebody whose skin is not the same color as mine, from somebody who's
mm,
right, and that is also impacted by where you live, the laws in your country or community, your how a family has been raised, a culture, a faith, and there are such very varying degrees of um, understanding, but also like how people are treated based on different ways of understanding what it is to be autistic or neurodivergent in any way. And um, to think when you referred back to even the word that you didn't feel comfortable saying, but you said, right? That R
yeah.
word that,
Um,
I'm smiling, but not, right? Like, because it's not
mm,
that long ago. It's not that long ago.
okay.
And, and Kenya is not the only place where that was, you know,
Yeah,
a
true.
fact. This is still, um, to this day, lots of places where, there's a real lack of understanding of what it means to be autistic, and
Yes, true.
right, and that's not just in terms of the diagnostic or family experiences, but even what we're trained as professionals to do to support autistics, and that's huge for us as educators, right? If we're training teachers, if we're training service providers, and it's not based on information that is current. It's not based on current research. It's not based on um, research that involves multiple narratives within the autistic experience. Then it's not having the impact on people that it should. Right? It's often perpetuating stereotypes, and there are so many Karen Muriukis out there in like that are little people. They need to know the possibilities. They need to see representatives of who they are as a human being so that they can continue this journey. And I just so appreciate, you sharing of yourself so much in so many different ways. And um, it's hard though, right? Like how, and I know you're always up. I know I don't know when you sleep, but I know you're always working hard. Like how do you manage that kind of, the role that you have? And we wear this, it's like a big, I don't like the word burden, but like we carry this load of wanting to
Mm,
fix things and change things like now, like 20 years ago we wanted it better then, but now like it's urgent, right? We're trying to save
yes.
lives, and it's we want to get to the place where we're not just saving lives, but we're people are thriving. How do you manage that? How do you kind of carry that weight,
Mm.
and also realize that there's only so much you can do? Like where do you how do you I don't know, how do you navigate that journey?
Yeah, I think probably I would say that I think, wow. I would say it's just about just perseverance. Sometimes you just have to push through you just have to push yourself. and having a very strong supportive system that understands that you're facing this. When you have a very strong supportive system that knows what you're going through, and being able to navigate that kind of setting, then it will really build your confidence more. Initially, before, I was not able to even come out of my shell. I
Mhm.
was just within my own comfort zone. Like I just stepped back. I didn't want even to share my own lived experiences because according to some people, they may think it's a taboo culturally. Like they use culture and religious traditions to claim that you can't share this, you can't do this, you know.
Mhm.
But now, when you have a very strong supportive system that knows, okay, this is what this person is going through,
Mhm.
and when you rely on that supportive system that understands that, yes, this is what you want to share, you want to be able to advocate for yourself without any hindrance, without being judged, without any like people being very passive aggressive or just having that judgmental attitude. Because you find that you find when you even want to advocate for yourself, you face those kinds of barriers from people, the judgmental look, like they stare at you like they'll just wonder, what is this person trying to say? You find that people are not too happy about the fact that you're sharing your story, in that they are claiming that you're just exposing them. And that is not the case. You're advocating for yourself. You're not at the exposing them. It's just you're speaking your mind, you're speaking yourself. But when you have that, but through the support that you're getting from your community, that is how they help to build your confidence. And for me, that is what I have, like the supportive system that I have, even when that I still struggled so much. And yeah, having a very strong supportive system that really knows what it means to be autistic, and even from the community, even
Mhm.
from the wider disability community, that really helped me to just self-advocate, and even from people like from counseling psychologists that are really helping to really push me through to
Mhm.
just be myself. Yeah.
Mhm. And that's what it's about, right? It's about being able to be yourself and be accepted. And with that means that network, whether it be in the
Yeah.
family or a place of worship or in your organization. Like people find it in different places. And when you can't feel authentic, when you can't feel accepted, um, it's that becomes the biggest barrier, right?
Yeah.
That becomes, and I'll just want to make mention of just as you were chatting, a couple of comments came in. Sophia, oops, it just disappeared there. Sophia just reiterated that we carry our own trauma while we do this work, without a doubt,
True.
right? And it is very, very hard. Um, and then I'm sharing names, friends. I'm hoping that's okay because it's being sent to everyone. Sidra is just thanking you, Karen. Says that your work was so enlightening. That you really made her feel fortunate that she could witness your candidness and knowledge sharing. And Edwina, yeah, she said she likes the part where you shared with 6-year-old kids about you being an autistic adult. She can relate having to teach kids every day. She's a supply teacher, and
Mm.
it is. I know you've joined us in our Awesome Human Club before, right? And
Yes.
like we get as much as adults from sharing space with autistic kids as they get from us, because it's like magic that happens, right? Because we all get each other. It's so important for them to know that we're out there. But I think it's affirming when we see the impact that they feel represented, right? So it builds and builds and builds. And then so Sophia has a question. Um,
Mhm.
please give advice on how Scottish, brown, and Black people can work on their confidence to become their own advocates.
Yeah, my advice would be this. Create a very small supportive group, maybe as a social supportive group of Black, Scottish, autistic people. That's a small group as you can. It doesn't have to be a very big group. And then, of course, work with someone who understands what autism is, what it means to be autistic, especially within the Black community. It's a very important aspect to get that kind of psychosocial support from somebody who understands autistic people of color.
Mhm.
And we want to create that safe space for autistic persons who are still facing stigma
Mhm.
within that context, and they're still facing those kinds of attitudinal biases and stigma. So create that small community, even as little as you can. You start small, and from there you'll be able to build just a very big community. But I would suggest us to create that kind of that small community and be able to just meet on a daily basis, even share your lived experiences, maybe to have somebody or a counseling psychologist that yeah, I definitely, I've just seen your question. How do you, just hold on a bit. Let me see. How do we work on family acceptance? That's a very good question, Sophie. Yes, and it's very evident that we see families are still not yet ready to accept autistic people. They're not ready to accept or understand what autism is. It's meeting from, like, in my case, like stigma and shame. And
Mhm.
it's like you cannot discuss anything about disability or even autism because they consider it as a taboo.
Mhm.
So I would suggest for family acceptance, it is just creating awareness. I know in some cases when some members might not be PV or ready to accept, then don't deal with the people. If they're not ready to accept you, if they're not ready to accept who you are, just go to somebody who is really maybe a family member who might want to be educated about autism. Go to that family member, create that awareness. You start from within because remember, charity begins at home.
Mhm.
So create that very small awareness, but with people who are willing to be educated about neurodiversity and autism, just start from small within those setting, especially from families, but especially family members who are willing to be educated. Because when you try and talk to family members that are not willing to accept, then it won't work. Even here, I can remember when we tried to do that within, especially within the rural areas of Kenya, you find that people are just being kicked out. Just get out. They don't want anything. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
And you I think you almost have to decide where do you invest your energy, right? We talk about
Yeah.
like which hill do you climb? And there are so many young people who at least now they're starting to see role models out there. There's so much more than even 2 or 3 or 5 years ago in terms of, autistic role models that they are becoming
Yes.
aware of. It's unbelievable how much change is happening, and that speaks to the power of telling our stories, etc. But the diversity within the autistic community is as diverse as the human population, and that's what is often forgotten, right?
Yes.
The story of what it is to be autistic is as unique as the individual, and we're everywhere. um I think what's so hard for families is they want more than anything to protect and help their child be successful, and
Yes.
so right. And when stigma and marginalization and oppression is what happens when you are openly autistic,
Hmm.
then a family has to figure out where do they, like, what do they do? Do they try to change the child? Do they try, because this is what so many will do, right? They'll try, and I mean, we know there are many different stories about, the lengths that people have gone to, and you shared some, horrific examples of what has happened. Um, but I think, like you said, it's that understanding, it's awareness, but it's that acceptance, right? Families want to help their child, and instead of trying to advocate in a way that changes the child, the advocacy needs to be about changing the systems and advocating in alignment with human rights, and
Mm.
knowing what their rights are, right? And
Mhm.
that's sometimes a problem, because many
Yes.
people don't necessarily know what their rights are, and who to go to, and
True.
there's pressure from extended family too, right? So
Yeah.
there's so much of there's so many obstacles and barriers that are compounded when, even with the best of intentions, a family member has so many pressures against them that may
Yeah.
not be in the best interest of the child, right? So knowing what to do
Mm.
is very hard. Um, and so then Sidra asked, what was the response that you received from the family and community when you first began to come out as autistic and advocating for disability rights? In Sidra's culture, she said it's such a point of shame to have difference because people of color were raised
Yeah.
to assimilate. Yes, this aligns with what we were saying. I was just saying exactly. And thank you for phrasing it that way, because I'm not a person of color, and I want to amplify, but I'd rather it be,
True.
yeah. So how, like, what was
It,
the reaction, Karen, from the community when you started to be open?
um, mixed. Some are ready to really but the disability community were really impressed with it. However, from within my circle, no, they were not ready. They just wanted me to hide it. They felt that I was being like I was just exposing them,
Hmm.
I was shaming them. You get it? Like to shame them
Hmm.
for I was like they were accusing me of shaming them.
Hmm.
According that is how we see it in our culture. When you come out as a person, as an autistic person, or any intellectual disability or psychosocial disability, they see it as a problem. You're shaming that family. You're you're bringing shame and dishonor to that family. That is how they see it within our culture, within the African culture. They see that as a shame. They see that as a curse. So that's
Hmm.
how, for me,
Hmm.
I they felt. But there was one person who was really going out of the way to make sure I was about it without being shamed about it, without being accused of exposing the members of the family because they see it as a taboo. So
Hmm.
yeah,
And I
it's
think,
something. It's
yeah.
yeah, it's general to do just the taboo part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad you used that word, because you know, the taboo the taboo is where the stigma comes from, right? It's this fear of being shamed, of being of not having the same opportunities, of not being seen. It's like when
Mm.
there's a label, um, and I think this happens in to varying degrees, um, in many autistic journeys, because we internalize that also, right? And
Mhm.
a lot of the things that, you know, as a young person growing up, an autistic who doesn't know that they're not broken, will hide their identity if they can, whether consciously or subconsciously, because of shame, because of stigma. And
Yeah.
that's even if their home and family are extremely supportive, because sometimes, kids can be cruel too, and they've been conditioned to treat certain things as less than. Um, uh,
Mm.
I'm going back up here. Yeah, Sophia is just sharing. She agrees with Edwina when she got the chance to share with students that she's autistic, ADHD, dyspraxic. It's been a wonderful light bulb moment for them. And she's asking, how do we work on family acceptance? Because you can't necessarily just throw your family away, especially if you're a little person,
No.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we work on family acceptance is what Sophie is asking.
Yeah, I did answer her question. One of the things that we need to work on when you're building a family acceptance within the community is just making sure that you work with people that are willing to be educated about what it means to be autistic, what it means to have a family member who is autistic. And that is how you build that kind of rapport with family members who are willing to really be able to, yes, understand what are their challenges and what's barriers that they're facing.
Mhm,
That is for those who are willing to be educated and be sensitized about it. But if
mhm,
you work with people who are not willing to be sensitized and they remain as stagnant as they can, then that means you're not doing enough. So
mhm,
work with those who are willing to learn about their child's disability
mhm,
by educating and sensitizing them on what it means to be autistic, what it means to have a child who is autistic, what it means for you to be autistic,
mhm,
explain your challenges, explain what are the barriers and what you want them to really understand so that they can be able to have a better understanding of you and what sort of reasonable accommodations that you require when it comes to being autistic and even possibly being
mhm,
neurodivergent in general. So
mhm.
it is very important to work with those who are willing,
Yeah.
yeah, and who are willing. Do not work with people who are not willing.
Mhm.
These are people who just leave them
Invest,
behind.
right. Invest in the places and spaces where you feel there's that beacon of hope, right?
Yeah.
So that, yeah, whether it's the cousin or the aunt or whoever. And it's
Mm.
interesting because in an autistic household, I mean, unless it's not a biological relationship to whoever the grown-ups are, whoever the guardians are of a child, autistics have autistics. So, an autistic child
Yeah.
frequently raised in a household that has more than one autistic. But that
Mm.
intergenerational piece is that we're still in this time when many of the adults who are parents of autistics, they do
Yeah.
not know, right? And you spoke to how, what do you mean there's autistic adults? like people don't know,
Yeah.
right? People don't in many countries, and I can't speak to which, but you cannot get a diagnosis once you're
Yeah.
past a certain age, and it's almost like your existence is denied. To be autistic as an
Mm.
adult is unheard of, which we obviously
Yeah.
know is not correct, but that's
It's true.
it's very, very difficult, shall we say, in any place where you're basically being told that you can't possibly be something that you are, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
right, so it's internalized, and then you raise that child, and even though the child and you are very connected, if they have a
Mm.
diagnosis and you don't, and you have been taught all your life you're not, right, it's very hard to um to recognize
Yeah,
all
to
of.
compartmentalize it. Yeah.
Right, yes,
And
yes.
And you never
Um,
got those interventions in your time. You never got those interventions in your time. You're made to mask your disability. And
right.
later on, when you are an adult, you
Yeah.
go through your medical records and you be like, okay,
Yeah.
why
So
didn't I?
that's, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
We hear this
crazy.
story. We hear this story so many times from people that are right now trying to unpack their journey. Right? Like,
Mm,
yeah. Um, yeah, and Sophie was just reiterating that families will hide that their child is autistic because of the wider family and community attitudes. Absolutely.
yes.
We have
Mm,
another comment from a participant who's wished to remain anonymous. Um, just speaking back to the part about unmasking and being openly autistic. And this person was actually told to tone it down on social media because they're making kids vulnerable, especially her neurotypical daughter, when they were talking about their neurodivergent experiences online. So I'm not sure if it was, within the family or employers, but they were being told, don't share this stuff on social media because it's bad.
wow.
Yeah, and it's making kids vulnerable. This is so it's
Hey,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah. But I
And there
mean,
was even one time, let me
yeah.
tell you, there's even one time I was even told, delete your post. Why are you
Mhm.
exposing us?
Right.
You know? There
Yeah,
was
why are
one
you
time
sharing
even,
that information?
why are
Yeah,
you sharing Nini? I mean, why are you sharing our,
yeah.
don't you know that you're putting a shame to our family, you're bringing a curse to our own family. It's the
Mm,
same here in African societies. It's like when you're sharing about your disability, especially if you have an intellectual, psychosocial, and neurodevelopmental disability, you are being accused. It's like they're just throwing jabs at you, like you're being blasted, you're being bashed, and
mhm,
you're told, take down that post,
mhm, mhm,
take down that post. Or they send you a very angry, and they lash out on you, send a very nasty message on your either on your SMS or WhatsApp and blast you. Yeah, you know, and
mhm.
tell you, can you take it down? Why are you exposing us?
Yeah.
You know, why are you
And
exposing our family?
and so that people who are watching later understand, like what you're
Yes,
referring to, I think we see this all the time, and it's not even about intimate details, right?
true.
It's literally just somebody saying something about, their sensory differences, or they're saying something
Exactly.
about their food sensitivities, or they're like things like that. And certainly if somebody's identifying as autistic or neurodivergent or ADHD or whatever, so it's not like they're sharing intimate details of their life,
True. Yeah,
right? It's so there's
true.
varying degrees, but
Mm.
the pressure to fit in is coming at us from all fronts, right? um
Yeah, yeah.
Sidra just wants to thank you for answering so vulnerably, and is saying,
You're
just so that
welcome.
we don't leave things, as we're getting ready to round off, we don't want to
Yeah.
leave on a painful note, right? She's asking
Mm.
you to imagine, after having had a difficult confrontation or conversation with a non-accepting person whose opinion
Yes.
really matters to you. Do you remember kind of those steps, right? Step by step. How did you help yourself caringly afterwards? Like, how did you, was there self-talk? Was there, how do all this hurt, all
The
this shame has
cooking.
happened. Like, what did, when they said or did those things, what helped
Mm.
you reframe, um, and she's referred to it as like that feeling of rejection. How did you care for yourself in that moment?
For me, I just sought therapy.
Mm,
Counseling was really one of the major things that I sought for because if you do things for your, let me tell you, my coping mechanisms is I struggle with my coping mechanisms, and I can be very honest, being very honest with yourself and understand that sometimes you struggle with your coping mechanisms, and every autistic person really struggles. As autistics, we really struggle with our coping skills. So for me, counseling was really what was like the last out for me, because right now, even now, I'm still currently getting help through a therapist.
Mhm.
Um, Even when I was still facing rejection, even now, I still say I just sought help from a counseling psychologist who really helped me through the journey, which I'm still continuing even now. And even speaking to people that know what it means to really face this kind of issue,
Mhm.
to face rejection, to really understand. They know what you're facing, they know what you're going through, and they're creating that safe space for you to talk about what you're going through, rather than just talking to somebody who is just not willing to listen, and they just being very dismissive.
Mhm.
So counseling was really one of the major things that I have really dealt with in my lifetime, because I know um, in matters my coping skills is still largely not okay.
Mhm.
But yeah, counseling is really one of the, I have to say counseling, and also seeking psychosocial support from people who really know what you're facing, and even in matters of rejection, they can be a
Mhm.
supportive system, even when you're
Mhm.
facing rejection from an accepting person within your
Mhm.
community. Yeah.
Yeah. So having those, professionals, and making sure you get the right professional too, right? Because not all,
Yes.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's a global search from autistics to find autistic psychotherapists and social workers and counselors, because then
Yeah.
there's a higher chance that we'll connect with somebody who gets us, right? And I think
Yeah.
that
We
that's very
understand.
powerful. But yeah, so finding that right person in professional circles, but also like just finding your people, whoever those people are.
Mm.
And so many of us, I think that's been a real insulating mechanism. And even when you didn't know you were neurodivergent, even when your friends didn't know you were neurodivergent, who did we connect best with, right? Other neurodivergent people. And later on, we're realizing
True.
now that these are these very positive, powerful connections. Um, yeah, and I'm just, um, yeah, and just further to our conversation, Edwina is just, sharing her curiosity about how the world, different places in the world, it's very different how autism is understood, and it can come with privilege. In some places, there's more support, education, and resources than others. But even when
Yeah.
information is available, we can still be very stigmatized, which is
True.
absolutely, yeah. And Sophia is just reiterating, we have a culture of hiding difficulties from the world, like stop showing your dirty
Mm.
laundry type thinking. Yes, absolutely. And
True.
we see that in social media too, right? Like when advocates will share certain things about themselves, there's things that it's okay to share, and then other things that are not okay to share. And then who takes that next step? Because there's people wanting to know, right? There's people that need to know. It's like,
Yeah.
right when we don't talk about women's health, then women's health doesn't get talked about, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right, in autistic and otherwise neurodivergent, the community, I think, by finding your people and knowing that you can go into these spaces and
Yeah.
have these conversations, it's very powerful. It's very, very powerful. Yeah. And Sophia just says finding our community. Yeah, 100%.
Very important.
And I mean, the
Mm.
example is, I always think about this when I'm in these sessions, because how we've all found each other has, like, many of us have not met in person, right? And
Um,
right, and it's such a beautiful thing, because we've reestablished what community looks like. And yes, part of it was pandemic for sure, but
yeah.
we've reestablished what this autistic community, this knowledge creation looks like, and autistic ways of being, and understanding what it means to be autistic has come out of these connections, because we're not operating as satellites now. we're I'm seeing clapping. We're
That is important.
right. We're not operating as
That's called
satellites. And
claps.
yeah, and how beautiful is it that like I know that I can message in WhatsApp you or Tanya or Sophia or like people all around the world, and
Yeah, yeah,
we're there for each other, right? Um,
yes.
because we get it, we understand, and yes, we're all unique. My experience is not your experience, and your experience is not Sophia's experience, and etc. But there are pieces to being autistic and being living in a world that was not built for us, kind of thing. Those pieces we do share. And the struggle is real, but those connections are just as real, even though we're in virtual spaces.
Yeah, true.
Just as real as if you were, walking down the street with me. It's just different, not less, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Well,
important.
I know it's like so past anybody's bedtime over there.
Yeah,
I I
going to
just
2 p.m.
oh my gosh. I again, like we so appreciate you doing this, and I know the timing was hard. There's never a
Yes, it's
sweet spot
okay.
because there's people in
Yeah.
all different time zones, but I so appreciate you accommodating us with this time. And I know that the recording, once we get it all ready and send it out, it will be available on our YouTube channel. And so this will
Yes.
be another resource, right? I know you're very much about that too. Like it's a repository of our
Hmm.
narratives. It's more information and sharing that people can draw upon later on. And so, again, thank you so much for giving of yourself in all that you do in your work
Mm.
back, like in Kenya. I was going to say back home. You're not back home. You are home.
I'm
Um,
home here
but
in my own country.
right? But in
Yeah,
in all that you do there, but also in all you
yeah.
do globally, because that matrix is very
Mm.
powerful. And that phrase I always use, ripples become waves, right? Like I feel
True.
those ripples that you send out, and I hope that we just continue to grow and grow and grow, by
Absolutely.
keeping these connections and building upon them, right? So
Yes.
we're sharing with the folks that are here, and then later on, we'll send out an exit survey, like a feedback survey, so that people can just share with
Yeah, they
us
can feel
what they've
it.
learned, and
Yeah.
what they would like to see with some of our next sessions. But thank
Mm.
you so much for being with us and for sharing of yourself in so many ways. I know this is not the end of our story. We'll continue
We'll
to
con
connect with
yeah.
you. And anytime I have my CRPD questions, I always know who to go to. And
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's
Because like, no, I can remember last year, the finance bill that was a very contentious one now didn't
mhm,
have anything that is disability related. And we had a meeting, we had a press conference. I don't know if you watched it, but I'll share the link where we as organizations of persons with disabilities in Kenya
mhm,
were expressing our deepest concern of the bill
mhm,
itself that was shared before Parliament, that it wasn't inclusive, didn't have anything that was disability centered. So
wow.
that was during the height of the Gen Z. You guys have been following our situation here, and I don't
Mhm.
wish to talk about it. I don't want when
Yeah.
our country is where we're at a very tight, very trying times. That's what I can say, and yeah.
Mhm. Well,
I don't wish to go further than that.
no, and
Yeah.
that's fair. It's a very difficult time in many places in the world right now, certainly. Um,
Yeah.
but for people
Yeah.
that are disabled or who are autistic or otherwise neurodivergent, it's that additional layer, right? That additional
Yes,
layer,
it is.
and
Yeah.
it's it's kind of like those who are experiencing the world through the neurodivergent experience, who are disabled,
Yeah.
every time there's something happening, global issues, local issues, we
Yeah.
get put on the back burner, right? And so that's
Sweep
right.
it. Just sweep it under the rug and forget
Right.
about it.
And that's the pandemic too, right? So when we think about it, the pandemic,
Yeah.
there were
Yeah.
so many things that were moving forward in different countries, related
Yeah.
to disability legislation and rights for people with disabilities, and things got
Mm.
paused. And I know this was happening at local and, for us, provincial and national levels, but right around the world. And so
Mm.
it's important. Yes, we have to deal with crises.
The crisis. Yeah,
Yes.
even now that we're facing another crisis in China. Right now, there's a very dangerous virus that is flowing in China, and
Mm.
I'm worried that it might even escalate to other countries, and meaning now we'll have to go back to how it was back in 2020 when we had the coronavirus.
Well,
Yeah.
and when these things happen,
Yeah.
people forget that those who are neurodivergent and otherwise disabled are being
Yes.
impacted, often
Yes.
even more so, right? Because it's
Yeah.
additional barriers, and
Mhm.
I mean, gosh, we could get into that conversation about what happened during COVID, but
Yeah.
that's why that whole idea of canaries, in the coal mine, right? Like the autistics
Yeah.
were like, no, 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 we can't do anymore.
No.
Like, hello, we're here and we're not going away.
Autistics are here.
Right.
Yeah.
Kai from Autistics Unmasked would say, like the future is autistic. We're here. I do believe that we're all here for a reason, but
Mhm. Mhm.
this is, like you said, this is our year. So
This is
let's
the real.
let's let's hope that, we can continue to move forward in a, continue with the positive and advocating for
Yes.
human rights. Yeah, Sophia says that was said at an event yesterday, at Glasgow University, Neurodiversity in a Scottish school, canaries in
Mm.
the coal mine. And
Yeah.
we really are sounding the alarm, and, thankfully,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not afraid to do that. Thankfully,
Yes.
we're oversharing. Thankfully, we're not afraid
Yeah, it's
to,
true.
to say what
We're
other
not
people,
afraid.
right? We'll be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And this is this is how change happens, when people tell their stories,
Mm.
when people are willing to be vulnerable. And so, again, thank you for sharing. And, everybody who's watching live and in the recording
Thank you
later,
so much. I appreciate.
check. Oh yeah, and follow Karen's work for those who are watching
Mm.
later. Karen, do you want to share any of your, like, what's your most
Yeah,
common social
you can.
media that you're using right now?
Currently I'm on Twitter,
Yeah.
Instagram, and
Okay.
Facebook. I'm gonna share it on the.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let me just share that in the chat right now. Let me
Perfect.
enable my chat and then you can gonna chat yeah,
And we
before we wind
will.
up. And of course I also have a question.
Yes.
Will this the I know some people from the deaf community would like it in sign language and also
Mm,
closed captions.
yes.
The people from the deaf community
Yes.
on
Do you
yeah,
have
they
do you
would
have
want an
do you have connections?
no. At the
Okay.
moment, no. Yeah.
We,
Maybe on your
I-
side you can. Maybe an international sign language. Somebody who knows international sign language, you can
well,
use that
Oh,
for
that's
it.
can I jump in? Can I jump into that
yes.
one?
Yes.
It just so
Yes.
matters. I know somebody. They are international. They're called Deaf Talk. I'll write it in here. I know they're the head people over in Islamabad, but I know they've got people all over the world. It's
Okay.
called Deaf Talk, and they have local people for the local deaf languages.
Oh,
You can reach out to them.
yeah.
I could search through my emails and find a link of people who I used to talk to back in 2022, because I've kind of broken them
Yeah,
down from there now.
because
But yes,
there's different ways of signing too, right? That's the thing.
yes,
And so yeah, I think like that's for accessibility, we absolutely want to look at where, where do we go next? Obviously we're going to do everything we can to make things accessible, but we're never going to achieve
mm,
full inclusion. We have to keep pushing and keep pushing ourselves and each other.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Sophia, we'll talk about that more later. And Karen, any of the links that you'd like shared, if there's any resources or anything you'd like shared, feel free to, you can email them to me as well, because what we did last session is we sent out an
Yeah.
email to anybody with the information that came up in the
Yeah.
session. So feel free, and we can share those resources, anything you would recommend for additional reading, or like I said,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
social media handles and all of that. And I'm just
Yes. Yes.
noting in the chat, we've got folks just extending their thanks, of course. Yes, and we've got your Instagram, your X, and Facebook, and LinkedIn. Yes, and I'm following you on all, I'm sure.
mhm.
So,
Karen, is Karen on Blue Sky yet?
oh yeah,
No, no.
I know,
Oh my
it's just
God.
one more thing. I know. I just joined because everybody was saying you got to come over, and so now I've got an extra account, and now I'm using them all even less because it's just so
Oh
much.
my gosh.
But eventually, right? We'll see.
Well,
Um.
some
Anyway,
people even push me to join TikTok, and I'm like, okay, what is
oh
that?
right,
Like,
yeah, no,
yeah.
I know. No, you're
Yeah.
doing lots. We have to be selective.
Yeah.
Self-care is meaning you can't do it all, right? So
You can't do everything. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just gonna ask that before folks leave, we can well, let's say goodbye for now. And
Yes.
then people can still stay in the room, but but thank you again so much. We're
I
gonna
appreciate that.
we're gonna
Thank you
stop
for
the
having me.
recording. We're so thankful to you for everything, and just so honored to have you share space with us. So thank you so much. And friends that are joining us, I think there's one more slide before we say goodbye. For those who are from our school board, nine is just doing, it's a little commercial announcement that we're doing a virtual presentation for staff in the school board that we're in, the Durham District School Board, called Reimagining Education: Insights and Tools for Neurodivergent Educators. And that'll be on the upcoming March 31st PD Day. So that's for those that are in our school board. But you'll see us more coming up with our next sessions of Neurodivergent Changemakers. We got lots of folks offering to do sessions, which is great. And if you or anyone you know wants to recommend or request to be a neurodivergent change maker, let's keep this going, right? Let's keep highlighting, amplifying these important voices and narratives. Our stories matter. So thank you so much, everybody. And we'll stop the recording now.